The Montana dawn broke cold and unforgiving, painting the snow-covered landscape in hues of lavender and gold. Abigail Thorne's breath formed small clouds in the frigid air as she dug into the frozen earth beneath an ancient pine tree. Her gloved hands worked methodically, ignoring the bite of winter that penetrated her woolen mittens. The hole wasn't large, just big enough for what she needed to bury. When she reached a depth that satisfied her, Abigail paused, pulling a simple gold band from her pocket. The wedding ring caught the first light of morning, glinting with memories that cut sharper than the Montana wind. She held it for a long moment, thumb tracing the inscription inside, "Forever yours, D." "This is the last time I'll cry for you, David," she whispered, her voice steady despite the tears freezing on her cheeks. "I promised you 3 years. I've given you 3. Today I bury the grief." She placed the ring in the small hole and covered it with earth, patting the soil down firmly. Not a grave, but perhaps a kind of memorial, marking the end of one life, and though she couldn't yet admit it, the possibility of another. The sun had fully crested the eastern mountains by the time Abigail started back toward her cabin. The morning light illuminated her solitary figure against the vast white landscape, 27 years old, but with eyes that had witnessed enough sorrow for someone twice her age. She paused, noticing tracks in the fresh snow that hadn't been there when she'd made her pre-dawn journey to the pine. Wolf prints larger than any she'd seen before, seeming to follow her path from the tree line to where she stood now. Abigail's hand instinctively moved to the rifle slung across her back, eyes scanning the forest edge. Nothing moved but the wind through bare branches, yet she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The prints were unusual, not just their size, but their pattern. Wolves typically moved with purpose, but these tracks meandered, circling back, as if the animal had been pacing, waiting. "Strange business," she muttered to herself, quickening her stride toward the cabin that sat alone against the mountainside smoke, rising in a thin column from its stone chimney. The cabin had been her home with David, a modest but sturdy structure they'd built together after their wedding. Now it stood as both shelter and prison, a constant reminder of what she'd lost and what she'd fought to keep. The town had expected her to sell the land after David died, to move back east with her sister Clara, or to accept one of the 3 marriage proposals that had come her way within months of burying her husband. Abigail had refused them all, choosing instead to remain on the land that had claimed David's life, learning to trap and hunt and survive alone. The townsfolk called her stubborn, unnatural. Some whispered she'd gone mad with grief. Let them talk, she thought, approaching her cabin. Their words couldn't hurt her any more than she'd already been hurt. Inside, she built up the fire in the hearth and removed her outer layers, hanging them near the flames to dry. The cabin was neat and orderly, practical in every way, a testament to Abigail's determination to endure. Shelves of preserved fruits and vegetables lined one wall, trapped pelts another. A small bookshelf held the few volumes she and David had brought west, their pages now well-worn from countless nights of solitary reading. She prepared a simple breakfast, going through the motions that had become her daily ritual. Eat, work, survive, repeat. The emptiness that had once threatened to consume her had hardened into something else, a quiet resolve, a refusal to surrender. After breakfast, Abigail checked her traps. Not for food, she had enough stored for winter, but for pelts to trade in town during her monthly supply runs. The snow had deepened overnight, making her path more arduous as she trudged through the forest, checking snares and reset mechanisms. The sky darkened as afternoon wore on, heavy clouds rolling in from the west, promising more snow by nightfall. She would need to hurry to check the last trap line before the storm hit. Abigail moved faster, pushing through drifts, that sometimes reached above her knees. The wind began to howl as she reached the furthest trap empty, like many of the others. Game had been scarce this season, perhaps sensing the unusually harsh winter ahead. She reset the mechanism and turned back toward home, when the sound reached her ears, cutting through the wind's moan with unmistakable clarity. A human scream followed by snarling. Abigail froze, listening. The sound came again, closer than she'd first thought, perhaps over the next ridge. Without hesitation, she unslung her rifle and moved toward the noise, caution in every step. Cresting the hill, she saw them in the small valley below, a pack of wolves, 6 or 7 strong, circling something on the ground. A horse lay dead in the snow nearby, its blood steaming in the cold. And there, in the center of the wolves' circle, a man. He was trying to stand, blood darkening the snow beneath him. One leg of his trousers had been torn open, revealing a deep wound that pulsed red with each beat of his heart. Yet, what struck Abigail as odd was the wolves' behavior. They weren't attacking, merely circling, as if waiting for something. Abigail raised her rifle and fired twice into the air. The sharp crack echoed across the valley. The wolves scattered at the sound, but didn't flee into the forest. Instead, they retreated to the tree line, watching with eerie, glowing eyes. "Don't move," she called, making her way down the slope toward the injured man. "I'm coming to help." The man had managed to prop himself against a boulder, one hand pressed to his bleeding thigh, the other clutching a revolver. His face was pale beneath a week's growth of beard, his eyes fever-bright with pain. "Leave me," he rasped as she approached. "Not worth it. They'll come back." "They always do," Abigail replied grimly, kneeling beside him to examine the wound. It was bad. The wolf's teeth had torn through muscle down to bone, nicking an artery. Without treatment, he'd bleed out within the hour. "This needs binding. I have to get you somewhere warm." She tore a strip from her undershirt and fashioned a tourniquet, pulling it tight above the wound. The man screamed, then went silent, his consciousness flickering. "Stay awake," Abigail commanded, slapping his face lightly. "What's your name?" The man's eyes fluttered. "Gabriel," he managed. "Gabriel Mason." "I'm Abigail Thorne. Can you walk at all?" "Gabriel Mason." He tried to stand, but collapsed almost immediately, his injured leg buckling beneath him. Abigail caught him, surprised by how much weight she could support. Years of working the land alone had made her stronger than she looked. "My sled," she said. "I use it for hauling game. It's just beyond that rise." The man was heavy, dead weight, as she half-dragged him across the snow. She'd hauled deer carcasses before, but this was different. This was flesh that could still feel pain, a life that could still be saved. Or lost, if she wasn't careful. The wolves followed at a distance, pacing them through the trees. Their behavior unsettled Abigail. Wolves were predators, yes, but they typically avoided humans unless desperate or provoked. These seemed almost purposeful in their surveillance. She reached her sled and managed to haul Gabriel onto it, securing him with rope to prevent him from sliding off as they traversed the uneven terrain. His eyes were closed, but his breathing continued shallow and ragged. Abigail glanced back toward where the horse lay. "Your things," she said, though she wasn't sure if he could hear her. "Anything important on that horse?" When he didn't respond, she made a quick decision, leaving him tied to the sled while she hurried back to the dead animal. The wolves had already begun to feast on the carcass, but scattered again at her approach. She found saddlebags still attached to the saddle and quickly removed them, not taking time to examine the contents. As she turned back toward the sled, something caught her eye, an object half buried in the blood-stained snow. She bent to retrieve it, a small leather-bound book, its pages beginning to dampen from the snow. A journal, perhaps. She tucked it inside her coat and hurried back to Gabriel. The storm was worsening visibility, dropping rapidly as snow began to fall in earnest. Abigail gripped the sled's ropes and began the arduous journey back to her cabin, following her own tracks before they disappeared completely under fresh snowfall. The wolves kept pace, maintaining their distance, but never quite disappearing from view. Occasionally, one would break from the tree line, venturing closer before rejoining its pack. Abigail kept her rifle ready, though firing in the deteriorating weather conditions would be difficult at best. By the time her cabin appeared, through the swirling white twilight had descended, and Abigail was nearing exhaustion. Gabriel hadn't stirred during the journey, his face now alarmingly pale, lips tinged blue from cold and blood loss. She dragged the sled to her door, unlocked it with fumbling fingers, then pulled Gabriel inside, managing through sheer determination to get him onto her bed. The wound had soaked through the makeshift bandage, still seeping despite the tourniquet. Abigail moved quickly, stoking the fire to blazing, heating water, gathering clean cloths, and what few medical supplies she had. She cut away the tattered remains of Gabriel's trousers to better access the wound, cleaning it as best she could. "This needs stitching," she told him, though she wasn't sure if he could hear. "It's going to hurt." Using a needle she'd sterilized in the flame and catgut she kept for such emergencies, Abigail began the painstaking process of closing the wound. Gabriel roused briefly, crying out in agony, before mercifully losing consciousness again. When she finished, she bound the leg with clean bandages, then turned her attention to the rest of him. He was suffering from the early stages of frostbite on his extremities and showed signs of fever, hypothermia, and infection, a deadly combination in the wilderness. Abigail worked through the night, applying snow to his frostbitten fingers and toes, changing compresses on his forehead as his temperature rose, spooning broth between his lips when he was lucid enough to swallow. Outside, the storm raged, and occasionally through gaps in the wooden shutters she glimpsed movement, the wolves still circling, still waiting. Dawn brought no relief. The storm continued unabated, and Gabriel's fever climbed higher. He tossed restlessly on the bed, muttering incoherently, occasionally crying out names Abigail didn't recognize. "Emma!" He called, his voice breaking with anguish. "Told you I'd come back. Broken." In the brief moments when his fever ebbed, Abigail managed to get more broth into him along with willow bark tea for the fever and pain. During one such moment of lucidity, his eyes focused on her face with unexpected clarity. "You," he whispered, reaching a trembling hand toward her cheek. "Finally, we meet again." "Girl from Silver Creek." Abigail froze the mug of tea halfway to his lips. "What did you say?" But Gabriel had slipped back into delirium, his brief moment of clarity gone. Silver Creek. The name unlocked a memory Abigail had buried nearly as deeply as her grief. A stagecoach journey 10 years ago when she was just 17. Bandits. Gunshots. A strange man who'd appeared from nowhere, driving the attackers away, tending to a cut on her neck before disappearing again. She'd never known his name. He'd never asked for hers. Could it possibly be the same man? With renewed curiosity, Abigail retrieved the saddlebags she'd salvaged and began to examine their contents. Spare clothes, ammunition, dried meat. Basic survival supplies for a man on the move. And at the bottom of one bag, wrapped in oilskin, a small wooden box. Inside lay 2 treasures, a worn gold wedding band larger than the one she'd buried that morning, and a child's drawing done in charcoal on yellowed paper. 3 stick figures holding hands, a tall one labeled Papa, a medium one labeled Mama, and a small one labeled James. The sight pierced Abigail's heart. This man was not just a stranger. He was someone who had lost as she had lost. Someone running from ghosts, just as she had tried to outrun hers. She replaced the items carefully, respecting their obvious importance. Then she remembered the book she'd found in the snow. Retrieving it from where she'd set it to dry near the fire, Abigail opened it to the first page. It was indeed a journal, the handwriting strong and slanting. The earliest entries dated back nearly 2 years, chronicling a journey from Wyoming Territory eastward, then north. Many pages had been damaged by water, the ink blurring in places, but fragments remained legible. April 18, 1885. They're buried now. My Catherine. My boy, I wasn't there. Wasn't there when the fever came. 200 miles away, driving cattle, while they suffered. God forgive me if I wasn't there? Abigail's throat tightened. The words could have been her own, the guilt a mirror of what she carried. She skipped ahead, turning pages delicately. December 3rd, 1885. Taking work where I can find it. Doesn't matter what kind. The pain follows regardless. Some nights I hope for a bullet. Would be quicker than this slow dying. And then an entry that made her breath catch, July 7th, 1886. Dreamed of the girl again, the one from Silver Creek. Red hair like autumn leaves, green eyes that showed no fear even with blood on her collar. Never knew her name. Wonder sometimes if she lived, if she found happiness. One life I know I saved, at least. Abigail's hand went to her neck fingers, finding the small scar there, a souvenir from that long-ago attack. She looked at the man tossing on her bed with new eyes. He had saved her life, and now by strange circumstance she might save his. For 3 days Gabriel burned with fever, drifting between consciousness and delirium. Abigail barely slept, changing bandages, applying compresses, spooning broth and medicine past his cracked lips. The storm continued, shrouding the cabin in a cocoon of white, isolating them from the world outside. In his fevered state, Gabriel confessed to ghosts. He begged forgiveness from Catherine and James, from a mother long dead, from God himself. He relived battles both literal and figurative, and sometimes he spoke directly to Abigail, though it wasn't clear if he truly saw her or some specter of his past. "Should have been me," he muttered once, gripping her wrist with surprising strength. "Should have died instead of them." "Hush," Abigail soothed, wiping his brow with a cool cloth. "That's the fever talking." "No," he insisted, eyes suddenly clear and piercing. "You know it's true. You feel it too. The guilt, the empty spaces where they should be." Abigail couldn't answer, her throat too tight with unexpected emotion. How could he know the very thoughts that had haunted her for 3 years? On the 4th morning the storm finally broke, and with it Gabriel's fever. Abigail awoke in her chair beside the bed to find him watching her, his eyes clear and alert for the first time since she'd found him. "You're still here," he said, voice rough from days of dehydration. "Where else would I be?" she replied, rising to fetch him water. "This is my home." Gabriel accepted the cup with hands that trembled slightly. "How long?" 4 days. The wolves got your leg pretty badly. You lost a lot of blood." He nodded, wincing as he shifted position. "You should have left me." Abigail met his gaze steadily. "Maybe. But you didn't." "No," she agreed. "I didn't." Something passed between them, then a recognition of shared experience of mutual haunting. Gabriel was the first to look away, his eyes roaming the cabin, taking in the sparse practical furnishings, the shelves of preserves, the pelts, the small bookshelf. You live here, alone?" "Yes." Abigail turned away, busying herself with stoking the fire, uncomfortable with the direct question. "My husband died 3 years ago. Blizzard caught him on his way back from town." Gabriel was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry. So am I." She straightened, changing the subject. "You need to eat something substantial. Your body needs strength to heal." As she prepared a simple stew, Gabriel watched her movements, noting the efficient grace with which she handled knife and pot. This was a woman accustomed to caring for herself, to making do with little. He respected that. "The wolves," he said suddenly. "Did they follow you here?" Abigail paused in her chopping. "Yes, they kept their distance, but they followed us all the way back. Still out there, too. I've seen them at the edge of the clearing." "That's not normal wolf behavior." "No," she agreed. "It isn't." "Almost like they were—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "What?" "Nothing." Gabriel shifted again, grimacing. "Just the ramblings of a man who lost too much blood." Abigail brought him a bowl of stew and helped him sit up against the headboard. As he ate, color gradually returned to his face. "Your husband," Gabriel said after a while. "What was his name?" "David." The name still caught in her throat sometimes. "David Thorne." "How did you meet?" Abigail settled back in her chair, surprised to find she wanted to tell him. "Church social in St. Louis. I was visiting my sister Clara. He was passing through on his way west. Said he was going to build a cattle empire in Montana Territory." A sad smile touched her lips. "I believed him. We were married 3 weeks later. Love at first sight." There was no mockery in Gabriel's tone, only genuine curiosity. "Something like that. Or youthful impulsiveness. I was 19, sheltered, dreaming of adventure. He was 24, full of plans and promises." Abigail looked away toward the window where late afternoon light filtered through the shutters. "We got the adventure part, at least. Just not the way we imagined." "Life rarely follows our plans," Gabriel said softly. "No," Abigail agreed. "It doesn't." She turned back to him. "And you, the journal mentioned Catherine and James." Gabriel's expression tightened, but he didn't seem surprised that she'd read his private thoughts. "My wife and son. Diphtheria took them both 18 months ago. I was 200 miles away driving cattle to market." His voice dropped to a whisper. "I wasn't there when they needed me most." The parallel to her own situation struck Abigail like a physical blow. She had been in town buying flour when the fever hit, had returned to find David delirious, refusing to rest despite her pleas. He'd insisted on riding through the brewing storm for medicine, had kissed her burning forehead, and promised to return by dawn. They'd found his body 2 days later, frozen beneath 3 feet of snow just a mile from their cabin. "I understand," she said simply. Gabriel nodded, recognizing the truth in her words. "I know you do." They fell into silence, the weight of shared grief settling between them like a tangible presence. Outside, the wind picked up again, whistling through the eaves of the cabin with mournful persistence. "Storm's coming back," Abigail observed, rising to check their supplies. "Might be a bad one." "I should try to leave before it hits," Gabriel said, though they both knew he was in no condition to travel. "I've imposed on your hospitality long enough." "Don't be ridiculous," Abigail replied, her practical nature reasserting itself. "You can barely stand, let alone travel. Besides, where would you go? The nearest town is 15 miles away. I'm a burden to you here." "I've carried heavier loads." She met his gaze evenly. "Rest, heal. Then we'll discuss your leaving." A knock at the door startled them both. Abigail's hand went instinctively to the rifle propped near the hearth. Visitors were rare, especially in winter, and especially during storms. "Who is it?" she called, moving cautiously toward the door. "Jenkins, Mrs. Thorne. From town. Got your monthly supplies." Abigail relaxed slightly, though not entirely. Jenkins was the supply runner who made monthly trips to outlying homesteads, bringing ordered goods from town in exchange for pelts, honey, or whatever the settlers could trade. She glanced at Gabriel, who had tensed in the bed, eyes alert. "Just a moment, Mr. Jenkins," she called, then lowered her voice to Gabriel. "Stay quiet. People talk." Gabriel nodded, understanding immediately. A woman alone with a stranger would spark gossip, especially in a small frontier town. He pulled the blanket higher, trying to make himself less noticeable. Abigail opened the door to reveal a lanky, weather-beaten man in his 50s, heavily bundled against the cold. Behind him, a horse-drawn sled loaded with crates and sacks waited in the snow. "Mrs. Thorne," Jenkins nodded, stamping his boots to shake off the snow. "Caught a break in the weather, thought I'd better deliver while I could. Storm's circling back, looks to be a bad one." "Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. You've saved me a trip to town." Abigail stepped aside, allowing him to enter with his delivery. Jenkins moved inside, carrying a crate of supplies, his gaze immediately landing on Gabriel in the bed. His eyes narrowed slightly, but he said nothing as he set down his burden. "Got everything you asked for," he said, turning back to Abigail. "Flour, coffee, salt, ammunition. The books you wanted weren't in yet. Mrs. Henderson at the store says maybe next month." "That's fine. I have my pelts ready for trade." Abigail retrieved a bundle of carefully prepared furs from a chest near the door. "Should cover what I owe." Jenkins examined the pelts, nodding with approval. "Good quality. This'll do nicely." His eyes slid back to Gabriel. "Didn't know you had company, Mrs. Thorne." Abigail's chin lifted slightly. "Mr. Mason was injured. Wolves got him. I found him near my trap line." "Wolves, eh?" Jenkins raised an eyebrow. "Been more wolf trouble than usual this winter. Funny thing, though, they're acting strange, not hunting normal prey, following people." He looked directly at Gabriel. "Almost like they're hunting specific targets." Gabriel returned his gaze steadily, but said nothing. "Well," Jenkins continued, turning back to Abigail, "I should be getting on. Still have the Wilkinson place to visit before dark." He moved toward the door, pausing with his hand on the latch. "Just checking on you, Mrs. Thorne, making sure you're managing all right. Alone out here with an injured traveler and all." The implication was clear, and Abigail felt a flush of anger. "I'm managing just fine, Mr. Jenkins. Christian duty to help those in need, isn't it?" "Course it is, ma'am. Course it is." Jenkins tipped his hat, a small smile playing at the corner of his mouth. "I'll let folks in town know you're coping well." After he left, Abigail stood at the window watching until his sled disappeared into the swirling snow. Her reflection stared back at her, pale and resolute, the silver chain around her neck catching the light. Her fingers went to it automatically, touching the outline of David's wedding ring beneath her shirt. "He'll talk," Gabriel said quietly from the bed. "Let him." Abigail turned from the window. "I stopped caring what the town thinks of me a long time ago." "You should care?" Gabriel insisted, struggling to sit up straighter. "A woman alone. Reputation matters out here." "Does it?" Abigail's laugh held no humor. "This town decided I was ruined when I kept this homestead instead of selling it, when I refused to remarry, when I learned to hunt and trap and survive without a man's help." She met his gaze directly. "You're just their latest excuse to judge me." Gabriel was silent for a moment, studying her with a new appreciation. "Tell me why you stayed," he said finally. "After your husband died, why not go back east? Why not remarry?" So she told him how she and David had spent 2 years proving up the land, building not just a cabin, but a dream. How she'd promised him as he left that last night that she'd be waiting when he returned. How she'd realized, standing over his frozen body, that she could never leave the place that held both their dreams and his final moments. She told him about the proposals that had come after practical offers from men who wanted her land, not her heart. About her sister Clara's anger when she'd refused them all. About learning to rely on her own strength, her own skills, her own company. "And you?" she asked when she'd finished. "Why are you here, Gabriel Mason? What are you running from?" Gabriel was quiet for a long moment, weighing his words. "After Catherine and James died," he began slowly, "I couldn't stay in that house, couldn't look at their things, their empty places at the table. So I drifted, took whatever work came my way, cattle drives, ranch hands, even mining for a spell." He shifted, wincing as pain shot through his injured leg. "Ended up in Wyoming territory last spring. Got work at the Morton Ranch, big operation owned by Judge Morton and his son. The son, Ellis, managed the place. Mean piece of work." Gabriel's jaw tightened at the memory. "One day I came across Ellis beating a Mexican boy, couldn't have been more than 10 years old. Kid had spilled some grain. Ellis was using his belt, had the boy's face bloody." Abigail could guess what had happened next. "You intervened." Gabriel nodded, "pulled Ellis off the boy. He didn't take kindly to that, drew his pistol. I was faster." His eyes met hers, unflinching. "Shot him in the shoulder. Didn't kill him, just stopped him. But his father was the territorial judge. There wouldn't have been a fair trial." "So you ran?" "So I ran," Gabriel confirmed. "Been moving ever since, northeast, wherever the work took me." A faint smile touched his lips. "Never expected to end up here, though. Never expected to find you again." "Silver Creek," Abigail said softly. "You remember. A stagecoach attack. 3 men. You appeared out of nowhere with a Winchester rifle." Her hand went to her neck, to the small scar there. "One of them had a knife to my throat before you shot him." "Grazed your neck." Gabriel nodded. "I cleaned the wound. You didn't cry, didn't faint, just thanked me and asked my name." "Which you didn't give." "No," he admitted. "I didn't. Was running from something then, too. Different trouble, same principle." Outside, a wolf howled long and mournful. Another answered closer to the cabin. Gabriel's expression darkened. "They're back," he said. "And they're still waiting." Abigail moved to the window, peering through a gap in the shutters. In the fading light, she could make out shapes moving at the edge of the tree line. Gray shadows against the white snow, their eyes reflecting the last of the daylight, like small, eerie lanterns. "6 of them," she reported, "same as before." "Abigail," Gabriel's voice was tight with urgency. "Those aren't ordinary wolves." She turned to face him, one eyebrow raised. "What do you mean?" "In Wyoming, there were stories about a man named Ezra Black. They said he could control wild animals, use them to hunt down people who crossed the powerful men in the territory." "That's superstition?" Abigail scoffed, though a chill ran down her spine. "Is it? Those wolves didn't attack me, Abigail. They corralled me, drove me until my horse foundered, then surrounded me. They weren't feeding. They were containing." "That's impossible." "Is it?" Gabriel repeated her words. Look at their behavior. Have you ever known wolves to track a specific person for days, to wait outside a cabin instead of hunting for food, to follow a scent through a blizzard? Abigail wanted to dismiss his claims as fever dreams or frontier myths, but the evidence was right outside her window. The wolves' behavior was unnatural, purposeful, in a way that defied explanation. "If what you're saying is true," she said slowly, "then someone sent them after you, someone who knows you're here." Gabriel's expression was grim. Ellis Morton survived the shooting, and Judge Morton has connections throughout the territories. If Jenkins recognized me, he could send word. Abigail finished the thought. But this Ezra Black, controlling wolves, it sounds like witchcraft. Not witchcraft. Gabriel shook his head. Something else. They say he was raised by a medicine man, learned secrets about animal spirits. Others say he just understands wild creatures better than most, can train them somehow. All I know is, men who cross the powerful have been found torn apart by wolves or mauled by bears in Wyoming territory. And Judge Morton employs Ezra Black when he wants someone found. Another howl pierced the gathering darkness, joined by a chorus of others. Abigail felt the hair rise on the back of her neck. "We're safe in here," she said, more to reassure herself than Gabriel. "Wolves can't open doors." Gabriel's smile was grim. "It's not the wolves I'm worried about, Abigail. It's what comes after them." Night fell over the cabin, bringing with it a renewed assault of wind and snow. The storm that Jenkins had predicted arrived with a vengeance, howling around the corners of the cabin, finding every crack and crevice to whistle through. Abigail built up the fire, hung extra blankets over the windows to block drafts, and prepared for a long night. Gabriel's fever had returned slightly, though not as severe as before. Abigail gave him more willow bark tea and watched as he drifted into uneasy sleep. In repose, his face softened, the lines of pain and worry smoothing away. She found herself studying him, the strong jaw covered in stubble, the small scar near his right eye, the way one lock of dark hair fell across his forehead. This man had saved her life once long ago. Now fate had given her the chance to return the favor. But if what he said about the wolves and Ezra Black was true, she might be harboring a man marked for death. Abigail touched the chain around her neck, feeling David's ring beneath her clothing. What would he have done in her place? The answer came immediately, exactly what she was doing. David had never turned away from someone in need, even at cost to himself. With that thought comforting her, Abigail settled into the chair beside the bed, rifle across her lap, prepared to keep watch through the long night. Outside, the wolves continued their eerie vigil, their howls rising and falling with the wind, a reminder that danger lurked just beyond the cabin walls. A week passed before Gabriel could walk 3 steps without pain buckling his knee. "Enough to leave," he announced one morning, watching Abigail prepare coffee over the hearth fire. She poured the steaming liquid into 2 mugs, as if she hadn't heard him, her movements deliberate and unhurried. Outside, the first cardinal of the season sang, heralding a false spring, the kind that promised warmth but delivered frost. "I should go before I bring trouble to your door," he added more firmly. Abigail finally turned, passing him a mug. "This town decided I was ruined when I kept this homestead instead of remarrying. You're just their latest excuse." The truth in her words hung between them, as tangible as the steam rising from their coffee. Over the past week, they had grown comfortable with each other, sharing stories of their lost loved ones, discussing books they'd read, discovering unexpected common ground. In those quiet evening conversations, something tentative and fragile had grown between them, not quite friendship, not quite more, but a connection neither had expected to find again. "You know why I need to leave," Gabriel said, staring into his coffee. "Jenkins has surely spread word by now. If he recognized me from Wyoming, it's only a matter of time before someone comes looking. And the wolves?" He glanced toward the window. "They're waiting for me to leave these walls. I won't bring that danger to you, Abigail. So you'll sacrifice yourself instead, with a barely healed leg and wolves on your trail." She shook her head. "That's not courage. That's just another kind of giving up." Before he could respond, hoofbeats approached outside several horses by the sound of it. Abigail and Gabriel exchanged alarmed glances. She rose first, moving to the window to peer through a gap in the shutters. "3 riders," she reported, her voice low. "One's Mrs. Caldwell from the church. Another looks like Reverend Miller. The third," she paused, eyes narrowing, "Victor Blackwood." Gabriel cursed softly. "Blackwood, richest man in the county, owns the bank, half the businesses in town." Abigail's mouth tightened. "He's made offers for my land 3 times, increasingly insistent." A knock came at the door, sharp, authoritative. Abigail straightened her skirts and smoothed her hair, then glanced at Gabriel. "Stay calm. Let me handle this." She opened the door to find Mrs. Caldwell at the forefront, a stern, gray-haired woman of about 60, her face pinched with righteous indignation. Behind her stood Reverend Miller, looking uncomfortable, and Victor Blackwood, a tall man in his 50s with cold eyes and an expensive coat. "Mrs. Thorne," Mrs. Caldwell didn't wait for invitation. "We've come about this situation." Abigail didn't move from the doorway. "What situation would that be, Mrs. Caldwell?" "Jenkins tells us you're harboring a strange man, alone, unchaperoned." The older woman's gaze moved past Abigail to Gabriel sitting at the table. "This is intolerable, Mrs. Thorne. The congregation demands proper arrangements be made." "He's injured," Abigail said evenly. "I'm Christian. That's the whole story." "The whole town is talking," Blackwood interjected, his deep voice carrying a note of false concern. "Your reputation, my dear. Your standing in the community." "Let them talk," Abigail replied, her voice steady. "And I'm not your dear Mr. Blackwood." Reverend Miller cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the confrontation. "Mrs. Thorne, we only want what's best for you. Perhaps, if the gentleman could be moved to town." "He's not strong enough to travel," Abigail cut him off. "And I won't turn away someone in need because of gossip. There's more to consider." Blackwood stepped forward too close for Abigail's comfort. "Your safety, for one. A woman alone with a stranger. Accidents happen in these mountains." The threat was thinly veiled, and Abigail felt a surge of anger. "I appreciate your concern, Mr. Blackwood, but I can take care of myself." "Can you?" Blackwood's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Your husband thought the same, didn't he, before the storm took him?" The cruel comment struck Abigail like a physical blow. Behind her, she heard Gabriel rise from his chair, his injured leg scraping against the floor as he struggled to stand. "I think you should leave," Gabriel said, his voice low and dangerous. Blackwood's gaze shifted to Gabriel, assessing. "And you are a friend of Mrs. Thorne's?" "And a friend," Blackwood repeated, his tone making the word sound obscene. "Well, friend, this is a community matter. It doesn't concern outsiders. It concerns me when you threaten a woman who's shown me nothing but kindness," Gabriel replied, limping forward to stand beside Abigail in the doorway. Tension crackled between the two men. Reverend Miller, sensing the potential for violence, stepped between them. Perhaps we should continue this discussion another time, he suggested, when tempers have cooled. An excellent suggestion, Abigail agreed, her voice arctic. Good day to you all. She closed the door firmly in their faces, then leaned against it, suddenly exhausted. Through the wood, she heard Mrs. Caldwell's indignant sputtering, Reverend Miller's placating murmurs, and Blackwood's ominous promise, "This isn't over, Mrs. Thorne." The sound of retreating hoofbeats eventually signaled their departure. Abigail remained at the door, her forehead pressed against the rough wood, eyes closed. Gabriel's hand came to rest gently on her shoulder. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I've made things worse for you." "No," Abigail straightened, turning to face him. "You haven't. Blackwood has wanted my land since David died. He's tried buying it, tried pressuring me to sell, tried arranging marriages with 3 different widowers who would sell to him after the wedding." A bitter laugh escaped her. "This is just his latest strategy." Gabriel's expression darkened. "What did he mean about your husband and the storm?" Abigail moved away, returning to the fire to warm her suddenly cold hands. "David was warned not to go out that night. Isaac Holloway, Blackwood's brother, and our nearest neighbor at the time, told him the storm was worsening." She swallowed hard. "But I was sick, needed medicine. David wouldn't listen to Isaac's warnings." Understanding dawned in Gabriel's eyes. "And Blackwood blames you." "The whole town does," Abigail said quietly. "They say if I hadn't been sick, if I hadn't needed medicine, David would still be alive." She looked up at Gabriel, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Sometimes I believe them." Gabriel crossed to her, his limp forgotten in his urgency to reach her. He took her hands in his grip warm and steady. "Listen to me, Abigail. Your husband made his choice out of love, out of devotion, not obligation." "How can you know that?" "Because I would have done the same," he said simply. "For Catherine, for James, for anyone I loved." The word hung between them, unexpected and powerful. Abigail stared at him, suddenly aware of how close they were standing, of his hands still holding hers, of the warmth and strength in his gaze. A wolf howled outside, startlingly close to the cabin. They both turned toward the sound, the moment broken. "They're getting bolder," Gabriel observed, moving to the window, coming closer to the cabin. Through the glass, they could see the wolves at the edge of the clearing, no longer hiding among the trees, but standing in plain sight, watching the cabin with an unnatural intensity. "This can't go on," Abigail said, joining him at the window. "We can't stay besieged forever." Gabriel turned to her, his expression resolute. "No, we can't, which is why I need to leave Abigail, draw them away from here, from you." "And go where?" she demanded. "In your condition, with wolves on your trail, and possibly Ezra Black behind them, it would be suicide." "Better me than both of us," Gabriel insisted. Abigail shook her head. "No, there has to be another way." As they stood there contemplating their limited options, a strange calm settled over Abigail. For 3 years, she had existed in a kind of suspended animation, not living, merely surviving. Now faced with real danger and a man who stirred feelings she'd thought long buried, she felt truly awake for the first time since David's death. "We're both haunting places," she said quietly, "not living in them." Gabriel looked at her, surprised by her insight. "Yes," he agreed. "That's exactly it." "I buried my wedding ring this morning," Abigail continued, her voice steady. "Under the old pine, said goodbye to grief, to guilt, to the past." She met his gaze directly. I'm done haunting Gabriel. I want to live again. The confession hung between them raw and honest. Gabriel's expression softened a mix of understanding and something deeper, something neither of them was quite ready to name. I want that for you, he said softly, but my presence here endangers that chance. Or perhaps, Abigail countered, it's the reason I have a chance at all. Outside, the wolves continued their vigil, a reminder that danger lurked just beyond their walls. But inside, something new had kindled a fragile hope that perhaps against all odds, they might both find a way to live again, not just survive. As night fell, the wolves' howls rose in eerie chorus, a sound both ancient and ominous, echoing across the snow-covered landscape like a warning. Or perhaps Abigail thought, as she and Gabriel prepared for another night under siege, like a promise of things to come. The next day dawned bright and clear, a deceptive peace after the tensions of the previous evening. Abigail rose early, as was her habit, to find Gabriel already awake, sitting at the small table with a piece of wood in his hands, whittling with a small knife he'd found among her tools. "Hope you don't mind," he said, nodding toward the knife. "Needed something to occupy my hands." "Not at all." Abigail moved to stoke the fire, curious about what he was carving, but not wanting to pry. As if reading her thoughts, Gabriel held up the piece, a small, delicate wildflower beginning to take shape from the pale wood. "Used to make toys for James," he explained. "Found I still have the knack." "It's beautiful," Abigail said softly, touched by this glimpse of the man beneath the hardened exterior. They shared a simple breakfast, the easy silence between them a marked contrast to the tension outside. The wolves had retreated to the tree line with the coming of daylight, but both knew they were still there watching. "I need to check my traps," Abigail said as she cleared away the breakfast dishes, "and gather more firewood. We're running low." Gabriel frowned. "Is that safe? With the wolves?" "They seem to be after you, not me," she pointed out. "Besides, I'll take my rifle. I won't go far." Gabriel's frown deepened. "I should come with you. You're not strong enough yet." "Strong enough to handle an axe," he insisted. "For the firewood, at least. I won't slow you down." Abigail considered arguing further, but recognized the determination in his eyes. He needed to feel useful, to contribute, rather than simply be a burden. She understood that feeling all too well. "All right," she conceded, "but we stay within sight of the cabin, and you tell me if your leg starts troubling you." They bundled up against the cold Gabriel in David's old coat, which fit him surprisingly well, and ventured outside. The air was crisp and clean, the snow sparkling under the morning sun. No sign of the wolves, though Abigail kept her rifle ready and her eyes alert. Gabriel moved carefully, his limp pronounced, but his determination evident in every step. At the woodpile, he took up the axe, testing its weight in his hands. "Been a while since I've done this," he admitted. "But it's like riding a horse, I suppose. Body remembers." Abigail watched as he positioned a log and swung the axe, his movements efficient despite his injury. She turned her attention to the nearest trap line, staying within shouting distance as promised. The traps were mostly empty again, though one had caught a rabbit, small but welcome addition to their dwindling meat supplies. As she reset the mechanism, a flash of movement at the edge of her vision made her freeze. Not a wolf this time. A human figure, ducking behind a distant tree. Abigail straightened slowly, hand moving to her rifle. "Gabriel," she called, keeping her voice even. "Come back to the cabin now." Something in her tone alerted him to danger. He stopped mid-swing, turning to locate her. "What is it?" "Someone's watching us. In the trees to the west." Gabriel dropped the axe, scanning the tree line. "How many?" "Just one that I saw." But there could be more. They retreated toward the cabin, moving unhurriedly so as not to provoke an attack. Gabriel's limp seemed more pronounced, whether from exertion or tension, Abigail couldn't tell. As they reached the porch, a movement to their left caught their attention. A young girl stepped out from behind the chicken coop, her thin face pale with cold and fear. Abigail raised her rifle instinctively, then lowered it as she recognized the child. Emma Watson." The girl nodded, her eyes darting nervously between Abigail and Gabriel. She couldn't have been more than 14, dressed in clothes too thin for the weather, a bruise darkening one cheek. "What are you doing out here, child?" Abigail moved toward her concern, replacing wariness. "Does your uncle know where you are?" Emma shook her head, backing away slightly. "Don't send me back," she pleaded. "Please." Abigail glanced at Gabriel, who nodded subtly toward the cabin. Understanding, she turned back to Emma. "Let's get you inside first. You're half frozen." Once inside, Abigail wrapped the shivering girl in a blanket and set her near the fire with a mug of hot tea. Emma clutched it gratefully, her knuckles white around the cup. "Now," Abigail said gently, "tell me what's happened. Why aren't you with your uncle?" Emma's gaze dropped to the floor. "Uncle Daniel's away in Helena. Left me with Mr. and Mrs. Parsons." Her voice lowered to a whisper. "Mr. Parsons, he gets mean when he drinks." Understanding dawned in Abigail's eyes as she took in the bruise on the girl's face. "Did he do that to you?" A single nod was the only answer. Gabriel, who had been keeping a respectful distance, moved closer, his expression gentle, despite the anger evident in his clenched jaw. "You were right to leave," he told Emma. "No one has the right to hurt you like that." The girl looked up at him, surprised by his support. "Uncle Daniel says I'm to mind Mr. Parsons while he's gone. Says Mr. Parsons is the man of the house now." "Your uncle would never condone you being hurt," Abigail assured her, though she wasn't entirely certain. Daniel Watson was the town's storekeeper and Emma's only family since her parents had died of typhoid 2 years earlier. A good man in general, but perhaps too trusting of others' character. "How did you find your way here?" Gabriel asked. "It's a long way from town." "I know the way," Emma said. "Uncle Daniel brings supplies to Mrs. Thorne sometimes. I came with him once." She looked at Abigail. "You were kind to me. Gave me a book to read." Abigail remembered now a thin, serious child who had stayed in the wagon while her uncle delivered supplies. Abigail had lent her a copy of Little Women, which the girl had devoured and returned on their next visit. "That's a dangerous journey for a young girl alone," Abigail said, "especially in winter. Had to leave last night, after—" Emma's hand went to her bruised cheek. "Walked all night. Saw the wolves, but they didn't bother me. Just watched. Then I saw you outside and hid. Wasn't sure if you'd send me back." Gabriel and Abigail exchanged glances over the girl's head. The wolves had left Emma alone, further evidence that their behavior was targeted specifically at Gabriel. "You can stay until your uncle returns," Abigail decided. "I'll ride to town when the weather allows and leave word at the store. Let them know you're safe." Relief flooded Emma's thin face. "Thank you, Mrs. Thorne." "Abigail," she corrected with a small smile, "and this is Gabriel Mason." Emma nodded at Gabriel, still wary but less frightened now. "Are you Mrs. Thorne's new husband?" The innocent question brought a flush to Abigail's cheeks. "No, Emma. Mr. Mason was injured. I'm helping him recover." "Like you're helping me," Emma observed. "Yes," Abigail agreed, grateful for the simple explanation. "Like that." Gabriel moved toward the door. "I should finish with the firewood. We'll need extra with 3 of us now. I'll help, Emma offered, starting to rise. You'll rest, Abigail countered gently. Get warm first. There will be plenty of chores later, if you're determined to help. After Gabriel had gone back outside, Emma watched him through the window. He walks funny, she observed. His leg was injured by wolves. Emma's eyes widened. The same wolves that are out there now, the ones that didn't bother me. Abigail hesitated, unsure how much to tell the child. Possibly, Gabriel thinks they're unusual wolves. They are, Emma said with the certainty of youth. I heard Mr. Parsons talking about a man who controls animals, a witch man from Wyoming. He said the man was coming here looking for someone. A chill ran down Abigail's spine. When did you hear this? 2 days ago. Mr. Parsons was talking to a stranger in the store. Didn't know I was listening. Emma pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Is Mr. Mason the one they're looking for? Abigail didn't answer directly. Why do you think that? Because the wolves are here, Emma said simply. And so is he. Out of the mouths of children, Abigail thought. The simple logic was irrefutable. Emma, did you hear anything else about this man from Wyoming or who he works for? The girl shook her head. Just that he was coming, and that Mr. Blackwood was paying him a lot of money. Blackwood. The name sent a surge of anger through Abigail. Of course he would be involved. If he knew Gabriel's true identity, if he'd somehow connected him to Ellis Morton's shooting in Wyoming, it would be another way to pressure Abigail. Harboring a fugitive would give him even more leverage to force her to sell her land. Is Mr. Mason in trouble? Emma asked, her young face concerned. Abigail considered how to answer. The girl had already seen too much harshness in her young life. Abigail was reluctant to add to her burdens. Yet she deserved honesty. Yes, she admitted finally. He might be, but we're going to help him. Because he's your friend. Emma nodded. Like you're my friend. Yes. Abigail smiled, touched by the child's simple understanding. That's right. When Gabriel returned with an armload of split wood, he found Abigail and Emma sitting at the table, heads bent over a book. The sight stirred something in him, a memory of Catherine teaching James his letters, the quiet intimacy of shared learning. What are you reading? He asked, setting down the wood by the hearth. Emma looked up, a shy smile lighting her face. Mrs. Tho Abigail is teaching me about plants. This book shows which ones you can eat and which ones are medicine. Useful knowledge, Gabriel approved, warming his hands by the fire. Especially out here. Did you know plants before? Emma asked. Where you came from? Some, Gabriel admitted, settling into the third chair at the table. My wife was good with herbs, grew a garden full of them. Where is she now? The innocent question hung in the air. She died, Gabriel said simply. Along with our son James. He was only 5 when he got sick. Much younger than you, but just as curious about the world. Emma's face fell. I'm sorry. It's all right, Gabriel assured her. It was a while ago now. My parents died too, Emma offered. That's why I live with Uncle Daniel. I'm sorry to hear that, Gabriel said, his voice gentle. It's hard to lose people you love. Emma nodded, her young face momentarily old with understanding. Uncle Daniel says we carry them in our hearts. That way, they're never really gone. Your uncle sounds like a wise man. Gabriel smiled. He is, Emma agreed. He's going to teach me to run the store someday. The conversation shifted to safer topics. Emma's life in town, her schooling, her dreams of someday having her own business, like her uncle. Gabriel listened attentively, asking questions that showed genuine interest. Abigail watched the interaction with a warming heart, seeing a side of Gabriel she hadn't fully glimpsed before: his natural ease with children, his gentle humor, his capacity for simple kindness. As evening approached, Abigail prepared a heartier meal than usual, conscious of Emma's thin frame and the need to rebuild her strength. The girl insisted on helping, and Abigail set her to peeling potatoes while she prepared a rabbit stew. "You're good with her," Gabriel observed quietly, coming to stand beside Abigail at the hearth. "Children are straightforward," Abigail replied, "honest in their needs and feelings. It's adults who complicate things." Gabriel's hand brushed hers as they both reached for the salt, a fleeting touch that nonetheless sent warmth through Abigail's arm. "What she said about Blackwood paying the man from Wyoming, I know." Abigail nodded. "It confirms what we suspected. Blackwood must know who you are, or at least suspect. He's using the threat to pressure me. Or to eliminate me," Gabriel added grimly. "Either way, my presence here puts both of you in danger." "Where would you go?" Abigail challenged quietly. "Injured in winter, with wolves, and worse, hunting you." Before Gabriel could respond, Emma called from the table. "Abigail, these are done." The moment broken, they returned to the mundane tasks of dinner preparation, but the question lingered between them, unanswered and troubling. That night, after Emma had been settled in Abigail's bed, Abigail would sleep in her chair. She insisted, while Gabriel kept the pallet near the fire. They sat talking in low voices by the hearth. No howls had pierced the darkness since dusk. "Their silence worries me," Gabriel admitted, stoking the fire. "It means they're waiting for something, or someone." "Ezra Black," Abigail said the name like a curse. "If he's really coming." "He is." Gabriel's certainty was absolute. "The wolves are just the vanguard. They drive the prey to exhaustion, then the hunter arrives." "We need to know more," Abigail decided. "About him, about what he can do, about how to stop him." "Legends say he can't be stopped." Gabriel's voice was low. "That he made a pact with dark spirits. That bullets pass through him without harm." "Those are campfire tales," Abigail dismissed. "He's a man, nothing more." "A dangerous man," Gabriel amended. "With unusual abilities." "Every man has weaknesses," Abigail insisted. "We just need to discover his." Gabriel studied her in the firelight, admiring her determination despite the fear she must be feeling. "You're remarkable, you know that most people would have sent me away at the first sign of trouble, or turned me in to save themselves." "I'm not most people," Abigail replied simply. "No," Gabriel agreed softly. "You're not." Their gazes held for a long moment, the air between them charged with unspoken feelings. Gabriel reached across the space separating them, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from her face with unexpected tenderness. Abigail didn't pull away, her heartbeat quickening at his touch. For 3 years, she had allowed no one close, had armored herself against connection, against the possibility of loss. Now, with danger at their doorstep, and the future uncertain, she found that armor cracking. "Abigail," Gabriel began, his voice rough with emotion. A creak from the bedroom interrupted the moment, Emma turning in her sleep. They drew apart, the spell broken. "We should rest," Abigail said, rising from her chair. "Tomorrow will bring its own challenges." Gabriel nodded, though reluctance was evident in his eyes. "Wake me for the second watch. You need sleep too." Abigail agreed, though they both knew she would likely let him sleep through the night. His legs still needed healing, and her body was accustomed to long hours of wakefulness. As she settled into her chair, rifle across her lap, Abigail found her thoughts returning to that moment by the fire, to the gentle touch of Gabriel's hand against her cheek. Something was awakening within her, something she had thought forever buried in the snow with David. It terrified her, and yet watching Gabriel's chest rise and fall in the firelight, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. Dawn brought a new complication. Clara Richardson, Abigail's sister, arrived on horseback just as the sun was cresting the eastern mountains. Abigail, who had finally dozed in her chair near dawn, was awakened by the sound of hoofbeats. She moved quickly to the window, relief flooding her, when she recognized her sister's distinctive riding habit. "Clara," she murmured, then louder to Gabriel, who had already risen at the sound. "It's my sister." Gabriel tensed, nonetheless, moving to retrieve his revolver from beneath his pillow. "Can she be trusted?" "With some things," Abigail replied cryptically. "Not others. Let me handle this." She opened the door just as Clara was dismounting, a vision of Eastern refinement, despite the frontier setting, perfectly tailored riding habit hair, neatly arranged beneath a fashionable hat, every inch the successful merchant's wife from St. Louis. "Abigail," Clara greeted, her tone cooler than the morning air. "You look well." "Clara," Abigail returned, equally reserved. "This is unexpected." Evidently, Clara's gaze moved past Abigail to Gabriel standing in the doorway behind her. "I see the rumors are true." "What rumors?" Abigail asked, though she could guess. "That you're living with a man," Clara replied bluntly. "Unchaperoned. The scandal has reached even St. Louis." Abigail sighed. "You'd better come inside." Once inside, introductions were made, though Gabriel offered only his first name, which Clara noted with a raised eyebrow. Emma, awakened by the voices, emerged shyly from the bedroom, adding another layer of complexity to the situation. "And who is this?" Clara asked, her surprise evident. "Emma Watson," Abigail explained. "Daniel Watson's niece. She's staying with me temporarily while her uncle is away on business." Clara's expression softened slightly at the sight of the girl's bruised face. "I see." Abigail prepared coffee while Clara removed her gloves and hat, surveying the cabin with the critical eye of someone who had never approved of her sister's choice to remain in the wilderness. "I won't insult either of us by asking if you're well," Clara said finally. "You're clearly as stubborn as ever." "And you're as direct," Abigail replied, a hint of a smile softening the words. Despite their differences, there had always been genuine affection between the sisters. "I came because of Victor Blackwood," Clara continued, accepting the coffee Abigail offered. "He's been corresponding with William." William was Clara's husband, a successful merchant whose business dealings occasionally intersected with Blackwood's. "About what?" Abigail asked, though she suspected the answer. "About your land," Clara confirmed. "He claims to have legal grounds to petition for guardianship over you. Says you're mentally unstable after David's death, living alone, rejecting society, now taking in strange men." Her gaze flicked to Gabriel. "No offense." "None taken," Gabriel replied dryly. Abigail's hand tightened around her cup. "He has no grounds. I've maintained this property successfully for 3 years. I'm of sound mind and body." "I know that," Clara said. "But Blackwood is influential, and he's painting a very different picture to anyone who will listen, including the territorial judge who would hear such a petition." "Why?" Abigail demanded. "Why is he so determined to have this land? There's better grazing land all through the valley." Clara hesitated, glancing at Gabriel and Emma. "Perhaps we should speak privately." "No," Abigail shook her head. "Whatever you know, they can hear. We're all in this together now." Clara sighed, relenting. "William believes there might be silver on your property, significant deposits based on recent surveys in the region. Blackwood wants to mine it. The revelation landed like a stone in still water ripples of understanding spreading through Abigail's consciousness. Silver. Of course. It explained Blackwood's persistence, his escalating pressure, his willingness to employ someone like Ezra Black. David never mentioned silver, Abigail said, struggling to process this new information. He might not have known, Clara replied. The surveys are recent, and even if he suspected, he was determined to ranch this land, not mine, it. Abigail remembered David's dreams, the cattle herd. They would build the legacy they would leave. He had loved this land for its beauty, its possibility for new life, not for what might be buried beneath it. So Blackwood wants me declared incompetent, Abigail summarized. Take guardianship of me, control my land, and strip mine it for silver. Essentially, Clara nodded. William thinks the petition could be filed as early as next week. He wanted me to persuade you to sell now while you still can, before Blackwood takes legal action. Never, Abigail said flatly. I'll never sell to Blackwood, not after what he's done. Clara's brow furrowed. What do you mean? What has he done? Abigail exchanged glances with Gabriel, a silent communication passing between them. Should they tell Clara about the wolves, about Ezra Black, about Gabriel's true identity? Gabriel gave a subtle nod, trusting Abigail's judgment regarding her sister. Clara, Abigail began carefully, what do you know about David's death? That he went out in a blizzard to get medicine for you, Clara replied. That Isaac Holloway warned him not to go, but he went anyway. That they found him frozen 2 days later. Her expression softened. That you blame yourself, though it wasn't your fault. What if it wasn't an accident? Abigail asked quietly. What if Isaac didn't just warn David? What if he deliberately sent him in the wrong direction? What if Blackwood wanted David out of the way to get this land even then? Clara's face paled. That's a serious accusation, Abigail. Do you have proof? Not yet, Abigail admitted. But things are happening that can't be explained otherwise. She glanced at Gabriel. Gabriel is being hunted by wolves that aren't behaving naturally. Wolves that might be controlled by a man named Ezra Black, who works for powerful men who want people eliminated. Clara's gaze shifted to Gabriel, reassessing him. Who are you, really? Why would Blackwood want you eliminated? Gabriel hesitated, then straightened in his chair. My name is Gabriel Mason, though I've used the name Cole Hartley when necessary. I'm wanted in Wyoming territory for shooting Ellis Morton, son of Judge Morton and manager of the Morton Ranch. Clara gasped softly. The territorial judge. Gabriel nodded. The same. I shot him because he was beating a Mexican boy nearly to death. I didn't kill him, just wounded him. But there wouldn't have been a fair trial not with his father controlling the courts. And you think Blackwood knows this? That he's connected to the Mortons? It's possible, Gabriel acknowledged. I found correspondence in the saddlebags before I lost my horse. Judge Morton has investment partners in several silver mining operations across the territories. Including here in Montana, Clara asked, connecting the dots. Gabriel nodded grimly. The letterhead showed Western Silver Consortium. When I was at the Morton Ranch, I overheard the judge boasting about his Montana partners, a banker and his brother, who were securing promising claims. Blackwood and Isaac, Abigail whispered, the pieces falling into place. Blackwood's bank could launder the silver profits, while Isaac helped identify properties with potential deposits. A perfect arrangement, Clara said. Judge Morton provides the capital and protection from legal scrutiny, while Blackwood acquires the land by any means necessary, Gabriel finished. Judge Morton has connections throughout the territories, and if Blackwood wants me gone to pressure Abigail, hiring Ezra Black would serve both purposes. Clara finished the thought. Remove a wanted man and frighten my stubborn sister into selling her land. The cabin fell silent as they all absorbed the implications. Emma, who had been listening wide-eyed from her seat near the fire, spoke up unexpectedly. I think Mr. Mason is right about the wolves, she said. They followed me all the way from town but never tried to hurt me, like they were looking for someone else. Clara looked at the girl with newfound interest. You saw these wolves too? Emma nodded solemnly. They have strange eyes, too smart, and they watch the cabin all the time. Clara turned back to Abigail, her expression troubled. If what you're saying is true, you're all in danger. You need to leave, come back to St. Louis with me until this is settled. And abandon David's land to Blackwood. Abigail shook her head firmly. Never. It's land, Abigail, Clara said, exasperated. Just land, not worth your life. It's more than land, Abigail replied, her voice steady. It's everything David and I worked for, everything we dreamed of building. And if Blackwood had a hand in his death, then I owe it to David's memory to fight for it. Clara recognized the stubborn set of her sister's jaw, the same expression she'd worn when she'd announced she was marrying David and moving west despite her family's objections. Then what will you do? Clara asked finally. You can't fight Blackwood alone. He has money influence and apparently no scruples about using either. We're not alone, Gabriel interjected. We have information, and if we can find proof of Blackwood's connection to Ezra Black or to David's death. We need to search the cabin, Abigail decided suddenly. David kept papers records of everything. I never went through them after he died. It was too painful, but he might have written something down, suspicions about Blackwood, about silver on the land, anything that could help us. Where are these papers? Clara asked. In the storage chest. Abigail nodded toward a large wooden trunk in the corner of the room. I couldn't bear to look at them after he died. Just packed everything away. Together, they moved to the trunk. Abigail hesitated before opening it, her hand resting on the weathered wood. This was David's last repository, his final thoughts and plans preserved in ink and paper. Opening it felt like disturbing a grave. We need to know, Gabriel said gently, understanding her reluctance. He would want you to use whatever he left to protect yourself. Abigail nodded, steeling herself, and lifted the lid. Inside lay neatly bundled papers, ledgers, maps, the administrative detritus of a life cut short. She began removing them carefully, spreading them on the table for examination. Clara, Gabriel, and even Emma joined in the search, going through documents, methodically looking for anything relevant to their situation. Here's something, Gabriel said after an hour of searching. A letter from the Territorial Surveyor's Office dated just a week before David died, requesting permission to conduct mineral surveys on your land. Abigail took the letter, reading it quickly. He never mentioned this to me. And here, Clara added, holding up a ledger, notes about meetings with Isaac Holloway. Apparently, they had several disagreements about property boundaries. David suspected Isaac was moving markers to encroach on your grazing land. That's not unusual for neighbors, Abigail said, but it shows there was tension between them. Look at this. Emma's small voice drew their attention. She held a folded paper that had been tucked inside a book. It's a map, with marks on it. They gathered around as Abigail unfolded the paper. It was indeed a map of their property, with several locations marked with small X's and annotations in David's neat handwriting. Silver trace, significant color. Show to Henderson for confirmation. He knew. Abigail whispered, her fingers tracing the markings. He knew there might be silver here. He knew. Abigail whispered, her fingers tracing the markings. He knew there might be silver here. Clara examined the map more closely. Look at these dates in the corners. He'd been tracking this for months. There's a letter here, too. Gabriel pulled another document from the chest. From a geologist in Helena. He scanned the contents quickly. David sent him rock samples after finding unusual formations while digging a new well on the North Ridge. The geologist confirmed traces of silver ore. Abigail's eyes widened. The new well. I remember that. Spring of '83. He was so excited about something he found kept it in a small tin box. When I asked, he just said it might be our future. Her voice caught. I thought he meant better water for our cattle plans. According to these notes, Clara pointed to scribbles on the map's edge. He discovered more promising sites after a rock slide near the Eastern Creek. That's when he started mapping systematically. No wonder Blackwood was so persistent about buying our land. Abigail said, the pieces finally connecting. David never told me because he wanted to be certain before getting my hopes up. And this? Gabriel had found a small notebook, its pages filled with David's writing. Journal entries from the weeks before he died. Listen to this, met with B today. Refused offer again, warned that I might regret decision. Not the first veiled threat, beginning to wonder about accidents on property. And this? Gabriel had found a small notebook, its pages filled with David's writing. Journal entries from the weeks before he died. Listen to this, met with B today, refused offer again, warned that I might regret decision. Not the first veiled threat, beginning to wonder about accidents on property. Abigail's heart pounded. B could be Blackwood. And this dated 3 days before the blizzard. Gabriel continued reading. IH came by with news of silver survey results. Wanted to discuss partnership. Seemed too eager. Something not right. We'll ride to Helena next week to consult with Territorial Office directly. IH Isaac Holloway, Clara interpreted. Blackwood's brother. So both brothers were interested in your land. And David was planning to go to Helena, Abigail added, which would have exposed whatever they were planning. But the blizzard came first. Or they used the blizzard, Gabriel suggested grimly. Isaac knew a storm was coming. If he deliberately sent David in the wrong direction, the implication hung in the air, too terrible to voice aloud. That David's death had not been a tragic accident, but a calculated murder orchestrated to clear the way for Blackwood to acquire land with valuable silver deposits. We need proof, Abigail said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. These suspicions, these journal entries, they're not enough to accuse a man like Blackwood of murder. But they're enough to fight his guardianship petition, Clara pointed out, to show that David was of sound mind investigating potential mineral rights, and that Blackwood had a motive to want him out of the way. We need to get these documents to the territorial judge, Gabriel agreed, before Blackwood can file his petition. Helena is 3 days' ride in good weather, Abigail calculated, longer in winter conditions. I can take them, Clara offered. I'm heading back tomorrow anyway. William has connections in Helena. He can ensure the right people see these papers. It's dangerous, Abigail warned. If Blackwood suspects what we've found, I'm not completely helpless, Clara reminded her sister with a small smile. I did learn to shoot before you dragged me to those suffragist meetings, remember? The memory brought a reluctant smile to Abigail's face. Despite their different paths in life, Clara had always supported her in her own way. Thank you, Abigail said sincerely, for believing me, For helping. You're my sister, Clara replied simply. Whatever our disagreements, that doesn't change. They spent the rest of the day organizing the documents, creating copies of the most important ones in case the originals were lost or stolen. Gabriel contributed his journal as additional evidence documenting his experiences with the wolves and his suspicions about Ezra Black's involvement. As evening approached, they prepared for Clara's departure the next morning. She would leave at first light, taking the most direct route to Helena. Abigail provided her with extra ammunition for the small derringer she carried along with provisions for the journey. Be careful, Abigail urged as they finalized the plans. If you see anything unusual, wolves, strangers following you, don't hesitate. Ride hard and don't look back. I will, Clara promised. And you three, what will you do while I'm gone? Stay alert. Keep gathering evidence, Gabriel said, and prepare for Ezra Black if he comes. How do you prepare for a man who controls wolves? Clara asked skeptically. Every man has weaknesses, Abigail repeated her earlier assertion. We just need to discover his. As night fell, they settled into an uneasy vigilance. Clara would sleep in the bedroom with Emma, while Abigail and Gabriel kept watch in the main room. The wolves had remained eerily silent all day, neither howling nor showing themselves a change in pattern that only increased their apprehension. They're waiting, Gabriel said softly, as he and Abigail sat by the fire, the others already retired. Gathering strength, or waiting for their master. Then we wait too, Abigail replied, checking her rifle for the third time that evening. And we prepare. Gabriel watched her, admiring the calm determination with which she faced each new challenge. In the firelight, with her hair loose around her shoulders and her face softened by shadows, she looked younger, less burdened by the years of solitude and grief. Abigail, he began hesitantly, if Clara finds help in Helena, if we somehow survive this and clear my name, what then? She looked up, surprised by the question. What do you mean? I mean, Gabriel struggled to find the right words. Would you want me to stay? After the danger has passed. The question hung between them, weighted with possibilities neither had dared contemplate amid the immediate threats they faced. Abigail was silent for a long moment, her eyes reflecting the dancing flames. 3 days ago, I buried my wedding ring, she said finally, said goodbye to grief, to the past. Her gaze met his, steady and clear. I think that means I'm ready for whatever comes next, even if it's uncertain, even if it's frightening in a different way. Gabriel reached across the space between them, taking her hand in his. I never thought I'd find a reason to stop running, he admitted, to build something again instead of just surviving. And now? Abigail asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Now I've found two, Gabriel replied, his gaze moving briefly toward the bedroom where Emma slept. The girl needs people who care about her, who'll teach her to be strong like her aunt was strong. And the other reason, Abigail prompted, though she suspected she knew the answer. Gabriel's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand, his touch sending warmth through her arm. The other reason is sitting right here, he said softly. A woman who saved my life, in more ways than one. Their gazes held the air between them, charged with unspoken feelings. Slowly giving her every chance to pull away, Gabriel leaned forward. Abigail met him halfway, their lips meeting in a kiss that was gentle yet profound, an acknowledgement of shared pain, of budding hope, of possibilities neither had dared imagine until this moment. When they finally drew apart, Abigail's eyes were bright with unshed tears, not of sadness, but of a complicated emotion that encompassed grief for what was lost, and hope for what might yet be. "I'm falling in love with you, Abigail Thorne," Gabriel said quietly. "But I'm broken inside. I have nothing to offer but a wanted man's uncertain future." "I don't need whole," she replied, echoing words she'd spoken days earlier. "I need honest and brave and kind." Her hand came up to touch his face, fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "I need you." The simple declaration hung in the air between them, powerful in its honesty. Gabriel caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "Then you have me," he promised. "For as long as you want me." Outside, a wolf howled suddenly, a single mournful cry that shattered the intimacy of the moment. They both tensed, hands moving to their weapons. Another howl answered, then another, until the night was filled with the eerie chorus. But there was something different about the sound. This time, an excitement, an anticipation that hadn't been present before. "They've found something," Gabriel said, rising to peer through the shutters. "Or someone." In the dim moonlight filtering through the clouds, he could make out the wolves not at the edge of the forest as before, but gathered in the clearing before the cabin, their breath steaming in the cold air, their eyes reflecting the faint light like small malevolent stars. And among them a figure tall, thin, cloaked in darkness, moving with unnatural grace across the snow. The wolves parted before him, respectful, almost reverential in their deference. "He's here," Gabriel whispered, his voice tight with dread. "Ezra Black." Abigail joined Gabriel at the window, her heart pounding as she glimpsed the figure moving among the wolves. Ezra Black was taller than she had imagined, impossibly thin, with a gaunt face partially concealed by a wide-brimmed hat. Even from a distance, there was something unsettling about his movements, too fluid, almost predatory in their grace. "Wake Clara and Emma," Gabriel whispered urgently. "They need to be ready." Abigail nodded, crossing quickly to the bedroom. She roused her sister and the girl, warning them to dress quickly and remain quiet. "He's here," Clara asked, her voice taut with fear as she pulled on her boots. "With the wolves," Abigail confirmed. "Stay away from the windows. Keep Emma in the corner behind the bed if possible." The girl's face was pale but determined. "I'm not afraid," she insisted, though her trembling hands belied her words. "Good," Abigail squeezed Emma's shoulder reassuringly. "But stay hidden anyway. For us." When she returned to the main room, Gabriel was checking his revolver, his movements economical despite the tension evident in his shoulders. "He's just standing there," Gabriel reported, peering through a crack in the shutters. "Watching the cabin, like he's waiting for something." "Or someone," Abigail added grimly, retrieving her rifle from its place by the hearth. "Us, most likely." "We can't stay besieged forever," Gabriel said, voicing the thought that had been circling in both their minds. "Supplies will run low eventually, and Clara needs to leave for Helena tomorrow with the documents." "What do you suggest?" Abigail asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Gabriel met her gaze, his expression resolute. "I go out there, face him, draw him away from the cabin." "That's suicide," Abigail protested. "You're still injured, and he has 6 wolves at his command." "7 now," Gabriel corrected, glancing back through the shutters. "Another just joined them." Abigail's mind raced, seeking alternatives. "We could try to slip out the back. Make for the woods, split up. In the dark, in snow, with wolves tracking our scent." Gabriel shook his head. "We wouldn't make it a mile." "Then we wait," Abigail decided. "Hold out until dawn. Clara can leave then with Emma. The daylight will give them a better chance." Gabriel considered this, then nodded slowly. It's our best option. But if he makes a move before, then... A sharp knock at the door cut through their whispered conference, startling them both. The sound was incongruously polite, as if a neighbor had come calling at an unusual hour. "Mrs. Thorne!" The voice that followed was equally unexpected, smooth, cultured, with an accent Abigail couldn't quite place. "I believe you have something that belongs to Judge Morton. I've come to collect it." Gabriel and Abigail exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. This was not the approach of a mindless killer or a supernatural monster, but of a man conducting business, unsettling in its own way. "There's nothing here for Judge Morton," Abigail called back, her rifle trained on the door. "Move on." A soft chuckle filtered through the wooden planks. "I'm afraid I can't do that, Mrs. Thorne. My employer has been quite specific." The man known as Cole Hartley, or Gabriel Mason, as he seems to prefer, is wanted for the attempted murder of Ellis Morton. "I'm here to ensure his return to Wyoming territory to face justice." "Justice?" Gabriel scoffed, moving to stand beside Abigail. "There's no justice in Morton's court. Only revenge." "Perhaps," the voice conceded. "That's hardly my concern. My task is merely to deliver you. How the law treats you afterward is between you and the judge." Clara appeared in the bedroom doorway, Emma half hidden behind her. "What does he want?" she whispered. "Gabriel," Abigail replied softly, "and he won't leave without him." The voice outside continued smooth as oil on water. "I should mention, Mrs. Thorne, that I'm not alone in my interest in your property tonight. Mr. Blackwood has expressed concerns about your welfare. He and Sheriff Lynch are currently on their way to conduct a wellness check, given the unusual circumstances of your living arrangements." Abigail's breath caught. Blackwood and the sheriff coming here. That complicated matters significantly. "He's lying," Gabriel whispered, "trying to unsettle us." "Is he?" Abigail wasn't so sure. The timing seemed too convenient. As if reading her thoughts, Ezra Black spoke again. "You have perhaps an hour before they arrive, Mrs. Thorne. I suggest we resolve our business before then. It would be simpler for all concerned." "What does he mean?" Clara asked, moving closer. "He wants us to hand over Gabriel without a fight," Abigail translated grimly, "before Blackwood arrives to complicate his task." "And if we refuse?" Clara pressed. The answer came from outside, as if Black had heard the question. "If you refuse, Mrs. Thorne, I'm afraid things will become unpleasant. My companions are growing hungry, and they're particularly fond of young meat." The threat to Emma was implicit, but unmistakable. Abigail felt a surge of protective rage. "You won't touch her," she called, her voice steady, despite her fear. "Come any closer, and you'll meet my rifle before your wolves meet us." Another soft chuckle. "Brave words, Mrs. Thorne, but perhaps misguided." A pause. "I'll give you 10 minutes to reconsider. Then we'll have to do this the difficult way." Footsteps crunched in the snow, retreating toward the tree line. Through the window they watched as Ezra Black rejoined his wolves, his tall figure nearly lost in the shadows beneath the pines. "He's bluffing," Gabriel said, though he sounded less than certain. "About Blackwood coming." "Maybe," Abigail agreed. "But we can't take that chance. If Blackwood and Lynch arrive while Black is here, they could use the opportunity to claim the cabin is under attack." Clara finished the thought. "Use it as justification to take you into protective custody under Blackwood's guardianship." "Or worse," Gabriel added darkly. "Blackwood could have Lynch arrest me as a fugitive, then leave me to Black's tender mercies once they've taken Abigail away. We need to get Clara and Emma out." Abigail decided, her mind working rapidly. If they can reach town before Blackwood and Lynch leave, they might be able to delay them, create a diversion. How? Clara asked. Those wolves will track us the moment we step outside. Not necessarily, Gabriel said, an idea forming. Black controls them, directs them toward specific targets. If they're focused on me, Abigail understood immediately. No, she said firmly. I won't let you sacrifice yourself as a distraction. Not a sacrifice, Gabriel corrected. A diversion. I'll draw Black and the wolves away from the cabin. You get Clara and Emma to the horses. They ride for town while you return to the cabin. And leave you to face Black alone, injured. Abigail shook her head. That's not a plan, Gabriel. That's suicide. I won't be alone, Gabriel insisted, his expression intense. You'll be covering me with the rifle. And I know these woods now know places to hide to double back. I can lead them on a chase long enough for Clara and Emma to get clear. Abigail wanted to protest further, but the logic was sound. They had limited options, and time was running out. I don't like it, she conceded reluctantly. But I can't think of a better alternative. Clara spoke up unexpectedly. I have an idea. What if we don't run? What if we negotiate instead with Black? Gabriel looked skeptical. He's not known for compromise. Not with Black, Clara clarified. With Blackwood, when he arrives. Negotiate what? Abigail asked. Your silence, Clara explained. The documents we found, David's journal entries, they implicate Blackwood in questionable practices, possibly even David's death. What if we offer to keep silent in exchange for his intervention with Black? Abigail considered this. Blackwood wants my land. He won't abandon that goal. No, Clara agreed. But he might be willing to ensure Gabriel's safety, even help clear his name, in exchange for your agreement to sell to him eventually, on your terms, with fair compensation. Give up the land, Abigail's voice caught. After everything David and I built here, not give up, Clara corrected gently. Exchange. For Gabriel's life, for your future together. The choice lay stark before Abigail, the land she had fought for, that contained David's dreams, and his final resting place weighed against the life of the man who had awakened her heart from its long winter. It wouldn't work, Gabriel said before Abigail could respond. Blackwood isn't coming here to negotiate. He's coming to take Abigail into custody, declare her incompetent. Once he has guardianship, the land is his regardless. Then what do we do? Emma asked, her small voice breaking the tension. I'm not afraid of the wolves. I can help. Abigail looked at the brave child, then at her sister, and finally at Gabriel. In that moment, she knew there was only one choice she could live with. We fight, she said simply. All of us together. We use what advantages we have, and we fight. Gabriel nodded, a mixture of pride and concern in his eyes. Then we need a plan. A real one, not a desperate gamble. They huddled together, voices low as they quickly outlined their strategy. Outside, the wolves had fallen silent, but they knew Ezra Black was still waiting patient, as the predator he commanded. Emma, you'll stay hidden no matter what happens, Abigail instructed. Under the bed in the storage chest, if necessary. Don't come out until one of us tells you it's safe. The girl nodded solemnly. I promise. Clara, you'll take the documents and be ready to ride at the first opportunity. If things go badly, don't wait for us. Get to Helena with the evidence. Clara squeezed her sister's hand. I won't leave you if there's any other choice. Gabriel and I will confront Black, Abigail continued. Together. He'll expect Gabriel to be weak from his injury. We'll use that misconception to our advantage. And if Blackwood and Lynch arrive, Clara asked. Then we improvise, Gabriel replied grimly. But we'll have to deal with Black first. He's the immediate threat. Their planning was interrupted by another knock at the door, sharper this time. "Time's up, Mrs. Thorne," Ezra Black called. "What's it to be? The easy way or the difficult?" Abigail moved to the door, Gabriel at her side. "We're coming out," she called. "Just the two of us. To talk." "A wise decision." Black's voice carried a note of satisfaction. Abigail turned to Clara and Emma. "Remember the plan. No matter what happens, stick to it." Clara hugged her sister fiercely. "Be careful." "Always," Abigail promised, then knelt to embrace Emma. "Stay hidden, stay safe." With a final glance at Gabriel, who nodded his readiness, Abigail unbarred the door. They stepped out onto the porch, weapons ready, but not raised aggressively. Ezra Black stood in the clearing, the wolves arranged in a semicircle behind him. In the moonlight, his features were clearer, gaunt, to the point of emaciation, with hollow cheeks and eyes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. He wore a long black coat that hung loosely on his skeletal frame and gloves despite the cold. "Mrs. Thorne," he inclined his head in a mockery of politeness. "Mr. Mason, thank you for being reasonable." "We haven't agreed to anything yet," Abigail replied coldly. "You said you wanted to talk. So talk." Black smiled, revealing teeth that seemed too numerous, too sharp in his narrow face. "Direct. I appreciate that." He gestured toward Gabriel. "My business is simple. Judge Morton wants this man returned to Wyoming territory to face charges for the attempted murder of his son. I've been employed to ensure that happens." "Ellis Morton was beating a child half to death," Gabriel said evenly. "I intervened. He drew on me first." Black spread his hands in a gesture of indifference. "The particulars don't concern me, Mr. Mason. I'm merely the collector." "And the wolves?" Abigail asked, her rifle still held ready. "Are they part of your collection methods?" "My companions," Black corrected, glancing fondly at the wolves behind him. "They assist me in persuading reluctant fugitives to cooperate." "How do you control them?" Abigail pressed, genuinely curious despite the danger. "It's not natural." Black's smile widened slightly. "An understanding, Mrs. Thorne, between predators, something a settler like yourself wouldn't comprehend." "Try me," Abigail challenged. Black studied her for a moment as if reassessing her. "You're an unusual woman, Mrs. Thorne. Most in your position would be trembling with fear, not asking questions about my methods." "I've faced worse than you," Abigail replied steadily. "Have you?" Black seemed amused. "I doubt that very much." He turned his attention back to Gabriel. "Now, Mr. Mason, will you come quietly, or must I ask my friends to persuade you?" Gabriel shifted his weight deliberately, emphasizing his limp. "Doesn't seem like I have much choice." "None whatsoever," Black agreed pleasantly. "Then I have a request," Gabriel said. "Let Mrs. Thorne and the others go. They have nothing to do with this." Black tilted his head, considering. "The girl and the other woman can leave. Mrs. Thorne, however, has made herself part of this by harboring you." "She didn't know who I was," Gabriel lied smoothly. "I told her my name was John Smith, that I'd been injured in a hunting accident." "A gallant attempt to protect her," Black observed, "but unnecessary. I have no interest in Mrs. Thorne beyond ensuring she doesn't interfere with my task." "And what does that mean exactly?" Abigail asked sharply. Black's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "It means, madam, that if you attempt to prevent me from taking Mr. Mason, you will regret it. I have no desire to harm a woman, but I will, if necessary." The threat hung in the air, clear and chilling. Abigail's finger tightened slightly on her rifle's trigger, but she maintained her composure. "Now," Black continued, "shall we proceed, Mr. Mason, if you would come forward slowly? Leave your weapon on the porch." Gabriel hesitated, then placed his revolver carefully on the wooden planks. He stepped down from the porch, limping more heavily than necessary, his hands held away from his body to show he was unarmed. Abigail remained where she was, her rifle still ready. "And after you take him, what then?" "Then I deliver him to Judge Morton in Wyoming Territory," Black replied. "What happens afterward is not my concern." "They'll hang him," Abigail stated flatly, "for defending a child." Black shrugged. "Perhaps. Justice takes many forms in the territories." "That's not justice," Abigail countered. "It's vengeance. A distinction without much difference out here, wouldn't you say?" Black gestured for Gabriel to come closer. "Enough talk. It's time to leave." Gabriel moved slowly toward Black, favoring his injured leg, apparently resigned to his fate. Abigail watched her heart pounding, waiting for the right moment. When Gabriel was halfway between the porch and Black, he stumbled, dropping to one knee in the snow. Black frowned, taking a step forward. "Get up, Mr. Mason. I have no patience for—" The rest of his words were lost as Gabriel launched himself forward with unexpected speed, his supposed weakness vanishing as he tackled Black to the ground. They fell together in a tangle of limbs, Gabriel pinning the taller man beneath him. The wolves reacted instantly, surging forward, with snarls ripping from their throats. Abigail raised her rifle and fired, dropping the lead wolf with a clean shot to the chest. The others paused, momentarily confused by the unexpected resistance. Gabriel and Black struggled in the snow, the thin man surprisingly strong, despite his skeletal appearance. His gloved hands found Gabriel's throat, squeezing with unnatural power. "Call them off!" Gabriel gasped, trying to break Black's grip. "Call off the wolves!" Black's only response was to tighten his hold, a feral grin spreading across his gaunt face. The remaining wolves began to circle again, working up the courage to attack despite their fallen packmate. Abigail fired a second shot, striking another wolf in the shoulder. It yelped and retreated, but the others continued their advance. "Gabriel!" she called in warning as a large gray wolf leaped toward him. Gabriel rolled at the last moment, pulling Black into the path of the attacking wolf. The animal's jaws snapped shut, inches from its master's face. Confusion evident in its sudden hesitation. Black used the moment to throw Gabriel off, rising to his feet with that same unnatural grace. He raised a hand, and the wolves immediately backed away, awaiting new orders. "Impressive," Black admitted, brushing snow from his coat. "But futile." Gabriel scrambled to his feet, positioning himself between Black and the porch where Abigail stood. "We're not going without a fight." "So I see." Black's eyes narrowed. "A pity. I had hoped to avoid unnecessary bloodshed." He made a sharp gesture with his hand, and the wolves tensed, ready to spring. Abigail aimed her rifle at Black's chest, knowing she had perhaps one shot before the wolves would be upon them. The standoff was broken by the sound of approaching horses, multiple riders coming fast through the trees. Black's head turned toward the sound, momentary confusion crossing his features. "Your employer arrives earlier than expected," Gabriel observed, seizing the distraction to back toward the porch and his discarded revolver. "Not my employer," Black corrected, his expression hardening. "An complication." 4 riders burst into the clearing, led by a portly man in an expensive coat whom Abigail recognized immediately as Victor Blackwood. Beside him rode Sheriff Lynch, a weather-beaten man with a perpetual scowl. The other 2 were deputies, young men, new to the territory, whom Abigail didn't know well. "Mrs. Thorne," Blackwood called, reining in his horse at the edge of the clearing. "Step away from that man. He's dangerous." Abigail didn't lower her rifle, now caught between two threats. "Which mars, Mr. Blackwood, I seem to have a surplus at the moment." Blackwood's gaze shifted to Ezra Black, recognition and alarm flashing across his features. "What in God's name is happening here?" "A private matter," Black replied coldly. "One that doesn't concern you." "Everything on this land concerns me," Blackwood blustered, though Abigail noted he remained safely astride his horse, well back from Black and the wolves. Sheriff Lynch spoke up, his hand resting on the pistol at his hip. "Mrs. Thorne, we've come to escort you to town. There's been concerns about your welfare." "I'm managing quite well, Sheriff," Abigail replied dryly, "as you can see." Lynch's eyes narrowed as he took in the scene: the dead wolf in the snow, Gabriel's defensive posture, Black's wolves waiting for commands. "What in tarnation is going on here?" "Ask Mr. Blackwood," Gabriel suggested, having retrieved his revolver and returned to Abigail's side. "Ask him why he hired Ezra Black to hunt me down." "I did no such thing," Blackwood protested, though his flush of guilt was visible even in the moonlight. "Lying doesn't become you, Victor." A new voice joined the conversation as Clara stepped onto the porch beside Abigail, a folded paper in her hand. "Especially when there's evidence to the contrary." "What evidence?" Lynch demanded. Clara held up the paper. "A letter from Judge Morton to Mr. Blackwood, acknowledging receipt of information regarding the whereabouts of one Cole Hartley and confirming payment for recovery services to be rendered by a specialist named Black." Blackwood's face contorted with rage. "Where did you get that? You had no right to go through my correspondence." "It wasn't in your possession," Clara replied coolly. "It was among David Thorne's papers. He intercepted it somehow shortly before his death." The implication hung in the air, heavy with accusation. Blackwood's flush deepened anger, mixing with something that looked remarkably like fear. "That's absurd," he sputtered. "David Thorne died in a blizzard, an accident." "Was it?" Abigail challenged. "Or did you and your brother ensure he wouldn't return from that storm after he discovered your plans for silver mining on our land?" A hiss of indrawn breath came from Lynch, suggesting this was news to him. "Silver on this property. Rich deposits," Clara confirmed. "According to the territorial survey David requested. The same survey Blackwood has been trying to keep secret while he maneuvered to gain control of this land." Ezra Black observed the exchange with detached interest, like a predator waiting for prey to weaken each other before striking. The wolves remained unnaturally still behind him, awaiting his command. "This is preposterous," Blackwood declared, though his voice lacked conviction. "Sheriff, I demand you arrest this man." He pointed at Gabriel. "He's a fugitive from justice." "A fugitive who saved a child from being beaten to death," Gabriel countered, "by a man whose father happens to be a territorial judge with connections to silver mining interests across 3 territories. Lynch hesitated, clearly uncertain about which side to take in the increasingly complicated situation. "Mrs. Thorne, perhaps you and your sister should come with us to town. Sort this all out properly." "We're not going anywhere," Abigail stated firmly. "This is our land, and we have evidence that Mr. Blackwood conspired to have my husband killed, then attempted to have me declared incompetent so he could gain control of this property." "Ridiculous!" Blackwood exploded. "Sheriff, do your duty." Before Lynch could respond, Ezra Black stepped forward, apparently tired of the diversion. "This has become tedious," he announced. "I came for Mason, and I will have him." With a sharp gesture, he sent the wolves surging forward, not toward Gabriel and Abigail as expected, but toward Blackwood and the sheriff. The horses reared in panic, throwing Lynch to the ground, while Blackwood clung desperately to his saddle. In the ensuing chaos, Black moved with that same unnatural speed, crossing the distance to Gabriel in heartbeats. A knife appeared in his gloved hand, flashing toward Gabriel's throat. Abigail fired without hesitation, the bullet striking Black in the shoulder. He staggered, but didn't fall, turning toward her with a snarl that was more animal than human. "You'll regret that, Mrs. Thorne," he promised, advancing on her now. Gabriel tackled him from behind, driving him face first into the snow. The knife spun away, landing near the porch steps. They grappled Black's inhuman strength, nearly overwhelming Gabriel despite his injury. Across the clearing, Lynch had regained his feet and drawn his pistol, firing at the wolves attacking the horses. One wolf fell, then another, but the remaining four continued their assault, seemingly heedless of their own safety. "Black!" Blackwood shouted, his horse dancing beneath him as he struggled to maintain control. "Call them off!" This wasn't the arrangement. Black ignored him, focused entirely on his struggle with Gabriel. His gloved hands found Gabriel's throat again, thumbs pressing into his windpipe with merciless pressure. Abigail couldn't risk a shot with the two men so entangled. She glanced at the knife lying in the snow, then made her decision. Dropping her rifle, she darted forward and snatched up the blade, then plunged it into Black's back. He arched with a howl of pain, releasing Gabriel and twisting to confront this new threat. His face, already gaunt, seemed to elongate in his rage, teeth bared in a snarl that was decidedly inhuman. "What are you?" Abigail gasped, backing away as he advanced on her. "Something you cannot comprehend," Black replied, his voice distorted with pain and fury. "Something ancient. Something that remembers when your kind cowered in caves, fearing the dark." He lunged for her unnaturally fast, despite his wounds. Gabriel, still gasping for breath on the ground, managed to grab Black's ankle, tripping him. Black fell forward, landing heavily at Abigail's feet. In that moment, a small figure darted from the cabin, Emma disobeying orders to stay hidden. In her hands she carried a lantern, its flame burning brightly in the darkness. "Fire!" she shouted, hurling the lantern at Black with surprising accuracy. It shattered against his back, oil spreading across his coat and igniting instantly. Black screamed a sound that raised the hair on Abigail's neck, not human pain, but something older, primal. He thrashed in the snow, trying to extinguish the flames consuming his coat. The effect on the wolves was immediate and shocking. As if released from some spell, they backed away from the burning figure, whining in confusion. Two turned and fled into the forest. The remaining pair circled uncertainly, no longer the coordinated pack that had obeyed Black's every command. Gabriel staggered to his feet, pulling Abigail away from the burning man. "Get Emma back inside," he urged. "Now!" Abigail ran to the girl, shielding her from the horrific sight of Black, rolling in agony, flames consuming his thin frame with unnatural speed. "Inside, quickly." Emma allowed herself to be hurried back to the cabin, though her face showed no fear, only grim satisfaction. "Fire kills monsters," she said simply. "My mother told me that story." In the clearing, Blackwood had finally lost control of his terrified horse. It bolted, carrying him back toward the forest edge, the two deputies following in its wake. Only Lynch remained staring in horror at the burning figure on the ground. "What in God's name?" the sheriff muttered, crossing himself reflexively. Gabriel retrieved Abigail's rifle and his own revolver, keeping both trained on Black as the flames began to die down. What remained was barely recognizable as human, a blackened husk that continued to smolder in the snow. And then, impossibly, it moved. A charred hand reached out, fingers clawing at the snow. The head lifted, revealing a face that was no longer human, if it ever had been elongated muzzle-like, with teeth too numerous and sharp for any man. "Sweet Jesus!" Lynch breathed, raising his pistol with a shaking hand. Before he could fire one of the remaining wolves, the largest, a scarred male that appeared to be the alpha, approached the burning creature. It circled once, twice, as if considering. Then, with swift lunge, it seized what remained of Black's throat in powerful jaws and tore. The body collapsed finally, and truly still. The wolf raised its bloody muzzle to the sky and howled a sound of release, of reclaimed freedom. The other wolf joined their voices echoing across the snow-covered landscape. Then, as suddenly as they had appeared, they were gone, vanishing into the trees with fluid grace. Silence fell over the clearing, broken only by the distant sound of retreating hoofbeats, as Blackwood and the deputies fled toward town. Lynch stood frozen, his pistol still raised, though there was nothing left to shoot. He turned slowly to face Gabriel and Abigail, who had returned to the porch. "What was that thing?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't think we want to know," Gabriel replied grimly. "Best to bury what's left, and never speak of it again." Lynch holstered his weapon with a hand that still trembled. Blackwood, he knew. He brought that thing here. "Yes," Abigail confirmed, "and he conspired with his brother to ensure my husband never returned from that blizzard. We have proof, Sheriff. Documents, David's journal, evidence of silver on this land that Blackwood wanted badly enough to commit murder." Lynch's weathered face hardened. "If that's true, Mrs. Thorne, then Blackwood will face justice." His gaze shifted to Gabriel. "And you? Are you truly wanted for attempting to kill Judge Morton's son?" "I shot him to stop him beating a child," Gabriel admitted. "Didn't kill him, though he deserved it. Didn't get a fair hearing either, with his father controlling the courts." Lynch considered this. "The territorial governor needs to hear about this, all of it. Corrupt judge's silver claims, whatever that creature was." He shook his head as if trying to clear it of the night's horrors. "I'll ride to Helena myself, see that the right people get the truth." "Thank you, Sheriff," Abigail said, genuine gratitude in her voice. Lynch nodded, then glanced at the smoldering remains in the snow. "What about that?" "We'll handle it," Gabriel assured him. "Some things are best left buried deep and forgotten." The sheriff nodded again, seemingly relieved to be absolved of that particular duty. He mounted his horse, which had calmed now that the wolves were gone. "I'll be back with the governor's men in 3 days," he promised. "Keep those documents safe until then." After he had ridden away, Clara and Emma emerged from the cabin to join Abigail and Gabriel on the porch. For a long moment they stood in silence, watching the last embers of Ezra Black fade in the snow. "Is it over?" Emma asked finally. Gabriel put his arm around the girl's thin shoulders. "Yes," he assured her. "Thanks to you. That was very brave what you did." "But dangerous," Abigail added, though she couldn't bring herself to scold the child who had likely saved all their lives. "You were supposed to stay hidden." Emma looked up at her, eyes old in her young face. "I couldn't let him hurt you. Any of you. You're—" She hesitated, then finished simply, "family." The word hung in the air, warming them despite the cold night. "Yes," Clara agreed, her arm circling Abigail's waist. "Family protects each other. Always." They retreated inside, barring the door against the night and its lingering horrors. The cabin seemed different, somehow. Warmer, more alive, with 4 souls within its walls instead of 1. Abigail built up the fire while Clara prepared hot chocolate, a special treat saved for occasions that seemed to warrant celebration. Gabriel and Emma sat at the table, the girl chattering excitedly now that the danger had passed, the man listening with attentive patience. Watching them, Abigail felt something shift within her heart, a final thawing of the ice that had encased it since David's death. Later, when Emma had finally succumbed to exhaustion, and Clara had retired to the bedroom to watch over her, Abigail and Gabriel sat before the fire shoulders, touching hands intertwined. "What do you think he was?" Abigail asked softly, her mind returning to the creature that had once been Ezra Black. "I don't know," Gabriel admitted. "Something not quite human, maybe never was. The frontier attracts all kinds of darkness." "And light," Abigail added, squeezing his hand. "It attracts light, too." Gabriel brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "What happens now?" "After Lynch returns with the governor's men, after the truth about Blackwood comes out." "Justice, I hope," Abigail said. "For David, for that boy in Wyoming." "And for us?" Gabriel asked the question hanging between them with all its possibilities. Abigail turned to face him, her free hand humming up to touch his cheek. "What do you want, Gabriel, truly?" He held her gaze, his answer coming without hesitation. "A home, peace, you." A small smile touched his lips. "Not necessarily in that order." "Here," Abigail asked, gesturing around the cabin. "On this land," Gabriel nodded slowly. "If you'll have me. If it's not betraying David's memory." Abigail considered this, her thoughts drifting to the morning she had buried her wedding ring beneath the pine. Not an ending, she realized now, but a beginning. A release from grief, a permission to live again. "David would want me to be happy," she said finally, "to build something new from what we started together." Her eyes met Gabriel's, clear and certain. "I want you to stay. I want us to build that home together, here on this land." "And Emma?" Gabriel asked, his gaze drifting toward the bedroom door. "Daniel Watson is a good man, but busy with the store," Abigail mused. "Perhaps she could spend summers here with us, learn about the land, about growing things." "A family," Gabriel said softly, testing the word as Emma had earlier. "I never thought I'd have that again." "Neither did I," Abigail admitted. "But here we are." Gabriel leaned forward, closing the distance between them. Their lips met in a kiss that held all the promise of new beginnings of winter, giving way to spring of lives, once broken, now healing in each other's care. Outside, a wolf howled in the distance, a single melodious cry that no longer carried menace, but seemed in that moment almost like a benediction. 3 months later, the cabin rang with the sound of hammers as Gabriel and 2 hired men from town worked to extend the structure. A new bedroom was being added along with a larger kitchen and a covered porch that would wrap around 3 sides of the building. Abigail moved between the garden she had planted and the outdoor table where Emma sat practicing her letters. The girl had arrived 2 weeks earlier for her summer stay, already showing signs of the strong, confident woman she would become. Clara had returned to St. Louis after testifying against Blackwood, but promised to visit again in the fall. Her husband's connections had proven invaluable in ensuring that Gabriel's name was cleared of all charges in Wyoming territory, a formal pardon issued by the governor himself after the full story of Ellis Morton's abuses came to light. Judge Morton had been removed from the bench, his involvement in the Silver Scheme exposing years of corruption and judicial malfeasance. Isaac Holloway had confessed to his role in David's death, leading Blackwood into the snow, to a place where Lynch's deputies now dug searching for silver deposits that would fund the territory's schools rather than one man's greed. As for Ezra Black, or whatever he had truly been, his remains had been buried deep beneath the old pine, the grave marked with no name, but with symbols Gabriel had found in a book of frontier legends, wards against evil, against return. The wolves had not been seen since that night, though occasionally in the deep silence of pre-dawn, Abigail would hear a distant howl, a reminder that wilderness still existed beyond their doorstep, wild and free. "Abigail," Emma called, holding up her slate. "I've finished my letters. Can I help in the garden now?" "Of course." Abigail smiled, watching the girl skip eagerly toward the neat rows of vegetables. Emma had flourished in the open air, her thin frame filling out with healthy exercise and good food. The bruise on her cheek long faded. Gabriel paused in his work, wiping sweat from his brow, as he watched Abigail instruct Emma on which weeds to pull and which plants to leave. The sight filled him with a contentment he had never expected to feel again after Catherine and James had died. Later, when the day's work was done and Emma had been tucked into bed with a story, Gabriel and Abigail sat on the partially completed porch, watching fireflies rise from the meadow grass. "I found something today," Gabriel said, reaching into his pocket. While digging the foundation for the new bedroom, he held out his hand, revealing a small, weathered wooden box. Abigail recognized it immediately, the box she had found in Gabriel's saddlebags that first night, containing his wedding ring and the drawing James had made. "I thought you might want this," Gabriel said quietly. "To keep with David's things, to remember." Abigail took the box, touched by the gesture. She opened it, expecting to see the ring and drawing, but found instead a small carved wildflower, perfect in every detail, made from the pale wood Gabriel had been working with weeks earlier. "I've been carrying the past too long," Gabriel explained, seeing her surprise. "Catherine and James will always be part of me, but they wouldn't want me living in their shadow." He took her hand. "Just as David wouldn't want you living in his." Abigail closed the box, gently holding it to her heart. "Where did you bury them?" "Your ring and James's drawing." "Under the pine," Gabriel admitted. "Beside your ring. It seemed right somehow." Abigail smiled, understanding perfectly. The old pine had become their place of letting go, of honoring what was lost while embracing what might yet be. "I have something to tell you," she said, her free hand moving unconsciously to her abdomen. "Something I've suspected for a few weeks now." Gabriel's eyes widened as he understood her meaning. "Abigail, are you—" She nodded, joy and a touch of anxiety mingling in her expression. "Due in winter, I think, around the time you first arrived." Gabriel gathered her in his arms, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. "A child," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. "Our child. A new beginning." Abigail agreed, resting her head against his chest. "One David and Catherine would approve of, I think." "They would," Gabriel agreed. "They loved life too much to begrudge us finding it again." They sat together as darkness fell completely, the stars emerging one by one above them like distant beacons. Somewhere in the forest, a wolf called once more, a single clear note that spoke not of hunger or pursuit, but of wild freedom under the vast Montana sky. "Winter always ends," Abigail murmured, remembering the morning she had buried her grief beneath the pine. Gabriel kissed her temple gently. "And spring belongs to those who wait for it." In the cabin behind them, Emma slept peacefully, dreaming perhaps of the summer ahead, of gardens and wildflowers and family found rather than born to. Before them stretched the land. David's dream, now theirs to nurture and protect, to pass on to the child growing within Abigail's womb. And within them both hearts, once shattered by loss, now beat in tandem, stronger for having been broken, wiser for having known grief and infinitely more precious for having found each other in the darkness of a Montana winter.